everybody. It's back to the grind of interviews. I'm trying to get some more interviews going before we get to the election day coming up here in August. We got through the primaries, so we're whittled down to at least the local set of finalist candidates. But now we got to figure out all the state primaries to go with that too. But not today. Right now, today we have Annabel Henley. She is running for District 9 against Christy. We're going to talk about that race and school board in general. And unfortunately, we have a big school topic to talk about, which I'm not too jazzed to talk about. But, you know, that's the world we live in, and we got to deal with it. So we're Almost Agreement at gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. You can go to our website, almostagreement.com. While you're there, you can check out my Election Guide 22. It'll have a link to this episode, as well as every other episode I've done with a candidate, as well as what race they're running in, all those kind of things, that stuff. So, I don't know. I'm proud of myself. I think it's a pretty solid resource to get you a little bit better informed about what's going on in this election cycle. So, I don't know. That's what we got. We'll let the intro play out, and we're going to talk to Annabel for a little bit. Hello, Miss Annabel. Is that I'm assuming I'm saying it right. I'm just powering through it like I know what I'm doing. Yes. All right, so Annabel Henley, like I always like to start out with so give us the Knox County map of District 9, and then let's go back to I don't know how we got from here to there. So like what got you into politics, that kind of thing. So give me the map, help me remember exactly where District 9 is in Knox County.
So District 9 used to be just all of 37920, but with the redistricting, we decided to jump the river and pick up over at Marbledale Baptist and the Methodist Church that it just went out of my brain. But it'll come back to me eventually. Over there by Cruz Farm Ice Cream, kind of like Straw Plains. It was very strange to me because my daughter moved from South Knoxville to Straw Plains, and we were thinking she couldn't vote for me. And then I was delivering signs to Marbledale Baptist. I'm like, I'm right by her house. And I looked, and sure enough, she's in District 9.
Yeah, that reminds me.
On the other side of John Sevier Highway in almost, in southeast Knoxville. So
yeah, because that reminds me. I forgot it in the intro on that Election Guide 22 page. I have KGIS and the Knox County Election Commission links. So you can double check that if you're not sure if you can vote for your mother or not. For those of you that have a mother running for something, there's a handful. We got a lot of ladies in this race, actually, now that I kind of jokingly talk about it, but we do have a number of ladies running. So vote for your moms. That's the show. All right. Let's call it a day, everybody. We'll see you later. Okay. So, I don't know, like what, Christy's currently in the seat. She's running to keep it. What got you? Let's go with the life of you, and then we'll go into the political life of you. So, you lived in Knoxville for 7 weeks, 7 years, 7 decades. You're not that old. I'm just kidding. But just give us the brief history of you and how we got to you here today.
Okay. Well, I was born in Nashville and then moved to Louisville, Kentucky for high school. But my family is originally from here. My grandparents were here, and so. First, I went to Sewanee for a couple of years out of college. Then I decided out of high school, but then I decided I wanted to teach in deaf education. And so UT had a great program for that. And I could live with my grandmother in Fountain City. And so that was a great time for us. And so I moved in with her, went to UT, met my husband while I was in right before I started to do my student teaching, because I was working at the School for the Deaf, and so was he. And we got married right before I graduated, and I taught up at TSD for a while. Also, we did this thing where we moved to Kansas for a year. It was kind of like, we're going to be independent. So we moved out there for a year. But when we came back, worked at TSD for a while. When I had my first child, decided to stay home, but he was in school. My husband was in school at UT at that point, so we couldn't really both not work. So we moved out to Maryville College and were dorm directors. Okay. Which, I've had a lot of weird jobs and interesting jobs, and I think they've all kind of prepared me for the school board run. So I had a bunch of women that I had to manage in that big dorm. And then we moved to Memphis for a while, and I worked in different jobs I got involved in early intervention services. So I worked part-time with TEIS with kids with disabilities, and mainly deaf kids, but any kids that use sign language. And then I have 5 kids. I raised them, coached their swim teams. So kind of became a swim coach for a while. When they all ended up in school, when they were all old enough to go to school, I was going to go back into the workforce. And I looked at what it was going to take to get certified to teach again, and it was a lot. And one of the doctors that I coached his kids, he said, would you like to manage my office? And I said, well, I don't know how to do that. He said, well, I know your skill set. I've been around you a long time. I'll teach you. And he really kind of changed the trajectory of my life. So I started managing his orthopedic office, did that for 3 years. Then we moved back home. My husband's parents needed us, and got a job over at UT managing their surgical oncology office. So a lot of office management, working with women, getting people to work together. And then got lured away to work for Tennessee Athletics for a while. And I worked as their operations director for swimming and diving. If you pick up on all the swimming, that's kind of a theme. And then when I decided that working for athletics was not my dream job, because it's harder than it sounds, I went back to medical management, ended up at the Knox County Health Department. So that's where I've been for the past 7 years. And
so what you're telling me is you could be a wealth of really fun conversations for me in the show.
Exactly.
But we're going to try to stay on topic. I'll do my best to stay on topic. I'm really good at wandering off.
Very eclectic. But, when the kids were little, I always thought that school board would be an interesting thing to do. I thought it was, that the setting policy was, but having kids and having 5 of them, that was never really in reality. But now that they've all graduated, it just seemed like my time had come, and time to kind of give back to the community. Kind of watched the school board over the past few years. Just really struggling to kind of get in the same boat, row in the same direction, whatever analogy you want to use. And that's kind of a skill that I have, is kind of bring people together and seeing if we can't get focused on the things that are most important. So
I feel like you could put a really good swim analogy somewhere in there,
probably
freestyle arms with butterfly legs. It just doesn't work right, or something like that. I don't know.
It really doesn't.
I don't know. I just made it up, so I'm going to guess I'm right. But okay, so that is the transition into. Okay, so you were here in Knoxville for the majority of your kids' education careers, or was that elsewhere?
We were mostly in Memphis then. We moved back when my youngest was 8, so he went through Dogwood, and I had one at South Doyle Middle. And then Josh he actually went to Vine for middle school, and then went to South Doyle High School and graduated in 2020.
Okay. Because I was going to ask if your kids are public school kids, because that's just one of those questions that people like to know the answer to. Okay, so I don't really want to talk about Texas, but I feel like we have to, because I feel like one of the things that I've learned in tried to do this show and talking to different because for your sake, the people that listen to me regularly are tired of hearing it, but I'm gonna do it anyway. I got into doing this, especially talking to candidates, because I don't understand what the jobs are. I don't understand what the different roles do and what they're responsible for and what they're not. We often hear candidates that aren't in schools or don't have anything directly to do with schools talk about schools, and that's one of the things that drives me nuts. Now, that's an easy one for you. You're running for school board, obviously, at schools. But the window of what school board can and can't do is fairly narrow from what it is allowed to from the state level. And so one of the things specifically at this one I learned, I was talking to Mr. Jackson, who's running for one, who was a school security officer. He'd spent some time in resource officers, the technical title or whatever, but he'd spent some time working there, and that was a focus of him, and that was a whole conversation that I didn't consider in what, now that I understand a little better, is probably the most unilaterally school board role that the school board has complete control over. It's not one that the state has a bunch of different rules on, as much as they do like curriculum. The state has a bunch of curriculum rules and stuff like that, where school security is something that is very much in the hands of school board. And so without going deep into the tragedy that was Texas, that is a very hot topic of concern right now for parents. I guess not as hot because they're now out of school for the summer, but, what steps are we not taking, or could we be taking, or what corrections, or what are we doing right that we can expand on with the current security system, in your view, as we move forward with the next years in school?
Yeah, so we, of course, when we were in Memphis, every school had a metal detector. And that was something that, was kind of a shock to our system. We weren't used to that. Memphis was a very different, they handle things differently, but it did allow for a higher level of security. Mostly they caught cell phones because at that point when my kids were in high school, cell phones were illegal in school. You couldn't even bring your phone in. But, hopefully it was a deterrent. I don't know that I would. I think the culture of Knoxville schools would probably not be the best place for metal detectors, but it is something that we could consider to keep schools safer. I think I've met a lot of amazing SROs, school resource officers. I think that working on training for them and making sure that they have the training that they need to protect our kids. At this point, we have had some tragedies here in Knoxville where officers maybe didn't have the best training to handle situations. So our kids have been more at risk from officers at this point than they have been from
other
school
students,
shootings.
right?
And it was. I mean, I'm sure a lot of us watched that entire video of Anthony going in and out and walking in, was being able to walk out into the parking lot and walk back in on camera. That was. I just think that's a training issue and a policy issue that we definitely need to make sure we have in place. Because that showed some glaring errors in our policy and in our security.
Right. Because I think an interesting one that happened I guess it was last summer, early this school year or whatever, was when Kincannon had pulled the KPD out temporarily to rework the I can't remember what the term is, but the agreement between KPD and the school system. Because I do find it, the more I think about it, the more it makes sense to me that an SRO is maybe not as trained as we would like them to be, but at least they're specifically trained for schools and dealing with kids and dealing with the situations that are in schools, where a KPD officer or Knox County Sheriff's deputy is not. They're trained to deal with everybody, and like it or not, kids are different, and there's different things that go on, and there's different interventions that make sense that you could do with kids that you shouldn't, or maybe that there's interventions you could do with adults that you probably shouldn't do with kids as readily. And so, I understand, especially with the specific we had here on how it's a conflict of trainings, it's a conflict of people that don't necessarily need to be in conflict, and that's how that goes. And so again, like I said, I think it is outside of a situation like yesterday. I don't think we talk about school security enough and what we can be doing to make it better, because I think that's a missing piece that people don't quite understand. Because I was one of many, and I know plenty of my kids' friends' parents are shocked when I tell them that SROs are not Knox County Sheriff's deputies. They look like them, they dress like them, but they are a whole separate body, and they have a whole separate ability of what they can and can't do in situations and stuff like that. And they're like, I thought they were sheriffs. It's like, no, they're not. And so it's one of those things I don't think the community quite understands what the relationship is going on there, and what control we do have as a school board over that.
Yes, when my daughter was at South Doyle Middle, they had a number of SROs, and there would be fights in the cafeteria every day that they would need to break up, and it was good that they were there to, that was something that the teachers should not have had to deal with. And so I do see, especially with that training, and that it's a very important role. And I think it also, when it's their SROs at the elementary level, I was at the Dogwood fundraiser dinner for their playground and got to sit at the same table with their SRO. And he's just the most lovely man. He was so kind, and you could tell he really cared about the kids. And so those elementary kids were getting a great first look at an SRO officer that really cared about them and made sure they had what they needed and met the needs of the school. And so I think that they really can play a very positive role.
Yeah, well, we're at Rocky Hill, and I've really liked ours, and I'm curious how it's going to go because his daughter goes there, and she just graduated. She's now going into middle school, and whether he gets to follow her to middle school or if he has to stay here or not,
he graduates to middle school.
He just gets to follow her around, which she'll probably be okay with until about 7th or 8th grade, and then it'll be really annoying to have dad around all the time. But okay, so let's I don't know, so. The decision to run, you kind of alluded to at least that it was always kind of a thing that you'd kind of seen and kind of paid attention to. But is there a specific this time around, this cycle that said, this is my time, I need to go now?
I think, through COVID and everything we went through at the health department, we really saw how important local politics are and how they can affect everybody's day-to-day life, which I don't think... I have friends that have served on city council and county commission, and I knew that those things were important, but it really kind of, I'd never thought that I would be that person. And, but when I really started to think about what was I going to do now that my kids were grown and, what was the next step for me? It just seemed like at watching the school board meetings that I could be a real benefit to that body.
Okay. Okay. So, there's a couple, I guess, weirdisms for this, lack of a better word, class of school board members coming in. Is that we're going to go? You guys get to come in right after a transition in superintendent. Mm-hmm. Do you think that is going to be a positive for the school board, for new school board members to have an impact, or do you think that's going to make it a little harder because you're going to have a new superintendent that's already? I mean, well, one, he was appointed by the current, which would be previous by the time you get in, kind of deal. Do you think that's going to be a deterrent to your ability to get things done, or is it going to be a positive?
I don't think so. I mean, Dr. Riswick's been around for a while, and so it's not like he's totally new to the area. And I feel like we can work with him, get things done. I don't see that as a positive or a negative. I just think it's we're all going to have to get used to each other, and it's kind of actually, the more I think about it, it could really be a positive because even though the current board and the retained board members will have worked with him, it'll be kind of, he's new, we're new, and we'll all kind of figure it out together. So,
okay. I mean, like I said, I get it's one of those that I am trying to understand the roles better in how much school board, the really basic, really super basic version is school board hires superintendent runs schools. Like that's the lazy basic definition of the job. And there's policy and there's other stuff that school board does. But the big thing is that superintendent, because we had some interesting battles between superintendent and school board over the last couple of years. And I was all like the whole time I'm watching it, trying to figure out, well, where's the hierarchy of structure here? Who's in control? And so that's one of the things that I am always curious to know what the actual answer is. If you know it, I'd be happy to share, or I would be happy if you would share.
I mean, my understanding from reading bylaws and the different policies is that the school board has one employee, and that's the superintendent. And so they hire him and help him set the policies that he then can enforce. So, it's kind of I don't know that there's another, a good analogy of anything else that's really like it. Because it's oftentimes when you look at a board, the person that's running the organization is also on the board and is a voting member,
right.
Which that's not this. And, he's an employee. So I think that, that the most important thing that the board and the superintendent can do is what I was talking about earlier, figure out what the goal is and let's all move in the same direction towards that goal.
Okay. So let's continue off of that thought process. And what are some goals that you would have for the board when you get elected?
Well, I went to the meeting at Fulton for the equity group that's been meeting and was really blown away by, and I already had seen these the numbers, but the disparities in discipline and the differences across the different, shall we say, types of children, different races, different socioeconomic backgrounds, whether or not they have a disability.
Right.
And so that to me is something that we need to figure out what is our policy. I know that Mr. Watson and Ms. Satterfield have pushed forward an equity policy that has not been that no one's been able to come to an agreement on. And so I think that would be something that I would want to discuss. I have one of my children has an IEP. Another of my children is not of the same race as our family. He was adopted as an infant. And so I've kind of seen things from an equity standpoint from my children's eyes, what it's like to be in an IEP meeting and try and having to advocate for that child to make sure they have what they need. And then also just seeing the school through the eyes of a Black son who, experienced school differently than my white children did. So that's something that's kind of important to me. And I really feel like it's something that the board can come to an agreement on. We just need to figure out what are the things that are causing some of the members not to want to move forward on that policy, right, and to see what we can do about that.
Right, because one of the things that, at least as I was reading on it, one of the things was that a lot of the stuff was already in place. It was just in separate little sub policies, and this new one was to kind of have it a unified block, and it would give it a little bit more spotlight, for lack of a better word. That wouldn't be a bad thing per se, but it's like, well, and again, one of the things that gets lost in the shuffle is like, was there a due cost to this? I didn't see that part of the conversation, because I think when it comes down to it, I think the number one thing that most parents at least consider in conversation is money. Money in the schools, how much are we paying teachers? How do we get better facilities and better materials for our kids? Which we get a happy year this year, hopefully. I'm concerned long term about what's going on in school budgeting. I think we have a number of issues at play. I guess I've become a pretty pessimist on the economy moving forward. I like that we're a sales tax state. I think it's great for a lot of reasons. One, sales tax state, we don't have to worry as much about inflation because the sales tax will increase with that inflation. But when sales stop because nobody has a job and can afford anything, then we have no income. And so that's one of my big fears moving forward. And so what are your thoughts as far as ways to maybe shield our schools from a break in budget, for lack of a better word, when we have a big, because that was one of the things early pandemic when I was talking to school board members back then. Early pandemic, we were all preparing for a huge economic drop. And so it was trim, cut, try to figure out where we can do whatever. And I think realistically, we should be looking at this, maybe not this next school year, but the tail end of it, if not this year after that. I'm having a hard time imagining we're not going to have some sort of significant economic downturn between then and now. And so how do we do that? How do we protect our teachers' pay and our other staff income when the school system at large loses a huge chunk of money?
Yeah, we are. I mean, we're in a world of hurt right now. I agree with you. And one thing that we don't have a whole lot of money at the health department either. I work in the women's clinic, and we're always, we are really hurting right now. Not post pandemic, because I don't think we're quite out of it yet. But anyway, one of the things that is part of my job is looking at the overall budget and trying to find ways. What are we spending money on that's just something that when we prioritize, it just is not something that we need to be focused on. And I have not been through the budget enough to understand that. I know that if I do get elected...
Good luck.
If I do get elected, though, I will be able to sit down with folks at central office and really get some more understanding of that.
Well, Ron is very fun to talk to. I'll tell you that right now. He's a good dude. And I've
always heard good things about him.
He knows his stuff. But I don't I don't think it's knowable the way these budgets work. Yeah. I don't think it's knowable. I think he's pretty good at it and he knows what he's doing. But at the end of the day, he's just cashing the checks the state sends because he's not exactly sure how the number got on the check. But he's like, that's what we need. Let's move. And it's not his fault. I think it's just the way the thing works.
Yeah, we need to look at the whys. Why are we doing some of the programs we're doing? Why, if you talk to teachers, which I've been doing a ton of in the past year, they keep saying, why are we spending so much money on standardized testing? And, that's something that comes down from the state that we don't seem to have a whole lot of control over, but it does seem to take up a lot of our money that could be going to other things. So I don't know what control we have over that, how we could possibly find other ways to evaluate our teachers and our children. I don't know what benefit we've gotten from the standardized testing. So that's a conversation that I would like to have at some point with others that might want to, enlighten me more or maybe agree with me some. So I just know that whenever you start looking at a budget, you've got to prioritize people and then safety. And some of our buildings aren't safe. We know a lot of the playgrounds weren't safe, which has been a huge issue this year. And I think that the board is really trying to do something about that. I know that a lot of the board members have worked to help schools get grants to help pay for playgrounds and whatnot. So, but I just feel like we need to prioritize people and safety. We talk about the teacher salaries, but the support staff it's just incredible to me how little they get paid. And they are such an important part of especially in the special ed classes. I know of, in the past 2 weeks, 6 teaching assistants that aren't going back to their jobs.
Right.
Because it's been such a tough time for them, and they've just haven't been treated well. And, in general, and I think that it wasn't intentional. It just was such a difficult time. So many teachers were out, and a lot of stuff fell on the assistants.
Yeah,
but
we had my fifth grader, my now sixth grader, whatever you want to call it. The fifth grade classroom, they have kind of 2 teachers that they rotate between throughout the day, and as they're prep for middle school kind of deal, and then they have special areas and stuff like that. But both of those teachers had babies this year. One of the subs ended up quitting teaching altogether. It was supposed to be one of the long-term subs to cover, I think, all told, of his 2 core teachers, he had 6 throughout the year this year. And that was really tough on him to stay consistent because, everybody's got their way of running their classroom, and he's not quick when it changes on him. And so that was a tough one for us. And I again, that's the teachers themselves, but I can't count the number of days this year where one of the 2 teachers ran the whole day for both classrooms, because the other was out, they didn't have a sub available, that kind of thing. And so again, it's a situation, and it's something we need to find solutions for. And with the constraints of the budget and stuff, I'm having a hard time personally seeing a good way out of this.
Well, I think a lot of our teachers, when I'm doing a lot of door knocking and meeting people, and when somebody answers the door and they say they're a teacher, I ask them a lot of questions. One teacher just said, I can live on what I'm making. Just get all the crap off me, all the extra paperwork and phone calls and all the assessments and all the things that are keeping me from doing my job. If you can, you hear all the government agencies talking about paperwork acts and getting rid of paper. And she said most every time they try to reduce the amount of paperwork, it ends up increasing by, 10%. And so, I think that's something that administrators can really help us with, is to try to take away a lot of the extra responsibilities they have. I was meeting with one of my son's teachers from South Doyle, and she was like, yeah, I'm running this club and that club, and during this time I have to do that. Oh, and in the mornings I ride on the school buses, and they do pay me extra for that. But, and it was making my head hurt listening to all the additional responsibilities she had. That was not the way it was when I was teaching. We had our planning periods, and we were allowed to use them to plan, and we didn't have, I think she said that they had to run 3 clubs. It was just unbelievable, some of the stuff that she was telling me they had to do. And I think if we can, teachers went into teaching to teach. They want to be in the classroom watching that light bulb go off for those kids. I
think it was Dominique Oakley when I had her in here. She's running for 7 as an independent. I think she said it best. She's like, when I was teaching, the teaching was free. You were paying me for the paperwork. And so there's just the same kind of premise being like, well, if you don't have all the paperwork, I'm not going to be as mad about how little I get paid.
Right.
And so I think that's I at least at a handful of people I've talked to, that's not an uncommon sentiment. And as a parent, that's one of the things that I struggle with as a parent and trying to communicate with teachers, and they're so busy doing other stuff. And one of the things for me, and I've told every school board person I've talked to this, we need a unified communication system for Knox County schools. I'm so sick of every semester I have a new app or multiple new apps, and it's going to get worse next year now that I have a middle schooler, and they're at my two are at separate schools, and so it's new apps, emails, the school messenger system that does exist but nobody really ever uses, and it's just a massive amount of stuff coming from different places.
I know there was a proposal to go with a whole new system, and I thought that it passed.
Well, I'm taking credit for it then. Yes, I did it. It was me.
We'll just say that Seth made that happen.
Yes.
So.
But again, that's as and as things go, we have it's following up on what you were saying as far as there's a lot of other stuff that these teachers are having to do, which I agree. I think it's inappropriate, and it's just extra work, and it's not doing the job. The job is to teach kids, not to fill out forms. I think
they'd have more satisfaction if they got back to doing that, and it would help with recruitment and. Because I think that's a big part of, going back to the equity situation, we have to get more teachers of color in our schools. There's so many studies that show that if kids have teachers that look like them, they're much more likely to succeed post-secondary. And I mean, that's just study after study after study. So it helps culturally. It's just something we need to focus on. And I know it's something that is, that it's not that Knox County Schools is not trying to do that. That is a goal that they have, and they're working towards that goal. So I just want to keep moving that bus forward. Right.
And so that kind of brought a thought in my head. I think it was News Sentinel ran a story the other day about major universities are sounding the alarm. The graduating class this year is the lowest percentage with intent for college in a while. Like there's less kids.
Yeah, and it looked kind of like that. Like it was, I saw that article as well.
Which I don't know. I'm not sure. I read the article, and it's been the thought process of other things that I've thought about for a while. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing personally. It's a bad thing if you're a university. Obviously, if you're a university admin, you're looking at less cattle, for lack of a better word, to push through your system and earn how you earn money and stuff like that. But I don't know, because especially it's been a focus here, and I think it's a good thing that we've spent time and energy focusing on trades in lower in K through 12 education and starting processes for students who don't necessarily want to go to college, but getting professional accreditations or steps towards that kind of thing. I think that's important stuff, and so it would stand to reason that some of the college application process would go down with that. And so again, one of the questions I always talk about when I'm talking with school board people is all right, so I've said it a couple of times, I have a rising sixth grader, so we've got 6 more years of school. What's the job market? I mean, what's the job market in 2030? And what are we training our kids to be able to do in that job market, and how much do we get to control that inside school board, or is that a state level situation?
Yeah, and the interesting thing about it, it's hard to know now what's going to be a shortage then, because for a while there we were having a nursing shortage, and then we had a teacher shortage, and then we have a shortage of people who can do HVAC and welding and the trade type things, and so it's hard to know what's going to be what's needed there, and that's why I think we need to make sure we're providing for kids to be able to do the things that interest them most. The career and technology education is super important, and I'm glad to see that there's been more focus placed on that. The Ford Next Generation Learning Academies and things like that are really going to make a difference there. I think I read Dr. Reiswick was talking about how, our goal doesn't need to be to get them across the stage. It needs to make sure that they have what they need after they're across the stage to be a contributing member of society. And that might be to go into a trade school, and it might be to go to college. But I think the pendulum swung it went so far one way away from career and technical ed that we now have a huge lack of individuals that are trained in those areas.
And then we as a society / education and stuff like that will shift towards filling that gap, and then it'll be overflowing, and we'll have a shortage over here, and then we'll shift that way, and we'll overflow that one, and then it'll push over here.
So balance is the key.
Well, what we need is a bunch of yous coming out of high school who can go into something they don't know, pick it up fairly quickly, and be good at it. Because I think, to me, that's
so that's critical thinking skills.
Right, that's education. That's education, is that because one of the greatest things, like my dad's got like 5 perfect advice notes ever that he's given me in my entire life. And one of them was when I went to UT and I was really struggling to finish and I wasn't liking it and blah, blah, blah. He's like, it's not about what you know. It's about, they know that you can learn. That's that you get the piece of paper, so they know that you can learn. It's not necessarily about what you learned. It's that you could prove that you're capable of learning. And that was like, they broke my brain at the time, which is sad because I should have been smarter than that at that point after 4 years at UT.
Well, we always talked about how if you could just get through the big orange screw, you could do anything. I don't know if that was a phrase that was used when you were in school, but it was like, if you could manage to get through all the crap that UT threw at you, it didn't, because even when I graduated with my degree in education, I didn't feel like they do a better job now of preparing, but it was like, I had to go out and figure out what my deaf students didn't know and teach it to them. Right. And I had to figure.
I wish there was more emphasis for me to take advantage of the career placement and that kind of thing that was available to me that I didn't really pay that much attention to and just went to class. And part of that was the screw because they changed the calendar on me my junior year. And I can't remember what it was, but it was like you had your I was a business major with a focus on X with a I can't remember what the phrasing was, but it was the other on the other thing, and then the other thing that I was doing through my classwork and stuff like that, they dropped from the calendar or the catalog. And so
sorry. Yeah.
Right. And so I ended up, I was on a 4.5 year plan no matter what at that point, but I had a really weird, I guess, 9th semester where it was like I had 2 classes and then I had like 3 filler classes just so I could be a full-time student and get all the benefits and stuff. I
had a very similar experience because I came from liberal arts Swanee, and I got to UT and they're like, oh, you had 4 semesters of religion and 4 semesters of French. We don't care. You don't need that here. And so I had all these hours, but they didn't count for anything. And then right about the time I was supposed to graduate, and I went to see my advisor, and she said, you have to take third quarter freshman biology. And you think you were in there a while. With all that time and everything, I was in my 5th year and getting ready to go into my student teaching was going to be in my 6th year. Right. So the end of my 5th year, I had to take, I was 22 years old with a bunch of freshmen, and it was quite an interesting experience. Right. The TA was younger than I was. So.
Right. Well, to compete in the horrors of the Big Orange Screw is I did take some summer classes every year, so I would have at least had a full 5 if I didn't do at least some summer every year. But I lived here anyway. It was local. So, all right. So I don't know. I lost my train of thought. So what's the jobs of the future? The critical thinking, the critical skills thing, and bringing that to be the focus of what we're teaching. Doesn't matter what we're teaching. It's their ability to learn. That's the focus.
And I'm worried right now that we're just teaching to the test.
I think so.
Assessing. One thing that one of my favorite quotes, I used to have a little bag with it on there, is that education is not the filling of a bucket, but the lighting of a fire. Don't ask me who said it. I used to know, but I can't remember right now. And but it's a great quote because you light the fire of wanting to know more. And you teach them how to be curious and how to want to learn. And I think that that's what most of our teachers signed on to do, not, to get them prepared for the standardized test that they're going to have at the end of the year. So I don't know how to get back to that, but I think that needs to be a goal, and we all need to be kind of rowing in that direction.
Well, and I think part of the problem with that is that that's not your job. That wouldn't be your job as in school board. And I think that's one of the issues we as a community have, is I don't think we know who does what. I've been at this for like 2.5 years, and I'm neck deep in it. And I still don't quite know. I kind of know the answer to this specific one, but there's a lot of stuff where it's like, well, who's in charge of this thing? And whose election?
Who makes us use standardized tests to determine? And you're
right. We have a whole, and everybody out there has a whole slate of House reps. They're going to be in primary when your general is taking place, and those are the people that make these things happen. Those are the things those are the people that are going to let vouchers through or not, and then we have to fight about that thing again this year, and that's going to be a distraction that doesn't get us to any real ends and doesn't fix any of the real problems that are currently happening. But we're going to yell and scream about vouchers some more. Honestly, I don't know anymore. I get in a lot of trouble because I'm open to the conversation about vouchers, because. I'm a what's the word I'm thinking here? To me, there's a consensus problem with how this system is working for educating our kids. I think at large, most people agree this is not working the way it's supposed to, and I hate using air quotes "supposed to," but I think there's I don't know if it's fresher because of the craziness that was the pandemic, or whether it's always been there and parents had time to pay attention because of the craziness of the pandemic. I don't know what it is that has gotten it so much higher now than it has been in the past, but I think there's a lot of people that are really frustrated with what's going on in the schools, whether it's imaginary CRT or trans athletes or all these other things that we bark and fight about. I don't think any of that's the real problem that parents actually have. I think the real problem that parents actually have is they don't think they're getting good education for their kids, and they're open to a change. And vouchers is at least a change, whether it's a good one or not. And I think that's the problem we have, because we're too busy talking about these things that don't really exist as real problems, instead of talking about what the real problem is and what's going on in our schools.
A big thing that we deal with in public health is evidence-based decisions. So I remember when I first started working there, and I went into Dr. Buchanan's office and I said, I want to do this and I want to do that and I want to do this, because I was coming from the private sector of medicine. And she's like, so where's the evidence that actually makes a difference? And so, I learned very quickly to find out and research and go back to her with a plan that had been shown to work somewhere. And so I think that, that the concern for me with vouchers is all the research that I've done looking at where they've been used in other areas of the country, is that the parents haven't gotten what they thought they were going to get from that. And a lot of kids get left behind. The ones that, it would sound great. Okay, every kid in this part of town who can't afford to go to private school, okay, now they can all go to web for free. That's not what a voucher is, but that's what people seem to think they are. Oh, yeah, we're going to give you $2,000 a year towards the, I don't know, what is it, 15, 16 to go to web now? Who knows? But
right. Well, I think that's an important part of the conversation that gets left out. Nobody that doesn't have their kids in private school or hasn't seriously looked at it knows how much it costs. And number 1A, not even that part. Number 1A to me is we don't know how much the voucher is going to be if they do
right.
it. Is it a $5,000 voucher? Or is it a $7,000 voucher? Is it whatever this weird new formula comes up for your kid because of what's ever going on with that? And the simpler formula is more complicated than the older formula. And we don't know. Like, this is not a specific school problem. This is just a good example of it. This is the game that we play as citizens with our elected officials at large all the time.
Well, and I get it as a parent. I mean, because you asked a little bit about I didn't go into a ton of detail, but we have had kids we have done what's best for our children all the way through. So we've done public school. I've had kids in private school. We have homeschooled for a few years. What was best for that kid is what we tried to do, because we've had kids with different learning needs, and the schools in Memphis were challenging. So we've done all sorts of different things. And was there a time where I thought, oh, wow, well, I've got this kid in private school, and we've got a lot of scholarship money, but wouldn't it be great if I had got the money that I would get, because he's not going to public school? That sounds great for somebody who's already doing that. But to say that it's going to help children who are struggling right now, whose parents can't pay that difference. Right. That to me is the problem. It's public school needs to be to take good care of everyone. And we don't want to have some of the money going to charters or vouchers or whatever, and the other kids are left behind. Right. And the other problem too is that the what's left of the state-run school system will have to play by I guess the other problem in the voucher conversation at large is that I can't just open a school. It's not like I could just open a school, hire some teachers, hire good teachers that know what they're doing, even accredited teachers by the state or whatever. I can't just open a school and actually compete in a real open market of services, I guess would be the example here. It's not just it's
that's the other part that I think people leave out of the conversation, is that I think if you had real competition in schooling, it might be a viable option to have a voucher out there, but you're not going to have that. We're not going to have people that have, really smart admin person that goes and hires great teachers and builds a little tiny, like Montessori style school or something like that, and uses these vouchers to great ends, because they can't just do that. They have to go through all the super process that's super expensive, and the legal team and all those things to be able to open a school in and of itself. And so it's there's a lot of things missing in the conversation, I suppose, is the bottom line of it.
I think we really need to focus on how we can improve public schools, not take money away from them. And so, like you said, it's parents are upset and things are broken. And I really love the Knoxville Education Foundation and the community schools model. I think that's something that needs to grow. My child was at Dogwood and Vine, which are both community schools, and the things that were available to us as a family were incredible. And so that's where I would like to see us focusing more. I love the fact that South Doyle has gotten the STEM accreditation. And so having another STEM school is going to be awesome. And I'm really excited for South Knoxville for that. So those are the kinds of things that I think we need to be looking at, is how to improve the schools that we have, how to focus more on the really good teachers and communities that we have, because that's the other thing that gets lost when you start talking about vouchers and charters, is the community that is so important.
Right. Because I think too, I just lost it. What was it? Okay. Help me understand magnet schools, because this is something that I've heard talked about, and how that functionally works. Because if South Doyle's got their STEM accreditation, does that give them magnet status so that they? I
don't think that they have magnet status yet. I think that the STEM right now it's just for the students that are zoned there or who request transfers there. But because I know LNN is a lottery situation as to who gets to go there. But there's so many kids that want to go there that can't. So if we have another STEM school that does become a magnet situation, I think that would be great. And awesome. And I think that what needs to happen though is that South Doyle can handle a STEM track and a non-STEM track, because that's not the best education for every kid. So. Right.
Well, because that's one of the things. Like I've got a friend of mine who he went through school in Colorado, and in Colorado it was I'm sure there's some technical term for it, but it was go to whatever high school you want as long as it's in the county or in the state. I think is in the county. So like you basically had a bunch of high schools that kind of specialized, and depending on what you or your student was into, you would, or it'd be the one across the street because you had no specific. But everybody had general, and then a specialty that each school kind of did, and so that gave. If you were into the specialty part of it, it gave you the option of going somewhere to get deeper into that thing for the student, which I thought was a cool idea. I don't know how hard the logistics would be to deal with that, but
who knows how big the district was, because we were huge. But again, evidence-based, I think that those are things that we need to be researching as a board. What are evidence-based things that we can encourage in our county that bring about improvements?
Right, and then go deal with the law director's office to figure out if you can legally do it, or you have to have the state do it for you, or whatever. Because that's because I get to me, and this is just my general political philosophy at large. Is I would rather not have. I certainly don't want the federal government involved, but I would like to have the state less involved in these kind of things. I don't understand why a district our size needs permission from the state to do what we want to do with our kids in our schools.
Well, and it feels like it's getting worse, with the charters can just kind of not pass go, do not collect $200 because you're going to be able to go to the state and they're going to approve you. Who cares what the local people think? And that's a huge concern that I have. That doesn't make sense to me at all. And it's like, well, what's the point of having this local body that we elect? And what's that point of doing what we do here? And what's that self-rule charter that we have in place? What's the point of having that if the state just gets to do it anyway? Right. Yeah. It's concerning.
Yeah, I don't like that either. Okay, so I have a 5-question set that I do on all my interviews, and I've got to remember them all because I lost my little cheat sheet that I wrote them down on. But number one is a little recap of the history and future of you as a politician. Have you run for office prior to now?
No.
No office period. This is first time running. Okay. Is this the beginning of a future in politics for you? You could, short of seeking re-election, because this is a 2-term seat.
Yeah, no, I don't. This is all I want to do. I've got 2 grandchildren coming this fall, and I'm
stocking up on that baby formula.
Well, yeah, we'll see how that goes. It'll be like toilet paper. That won't be the thing anymore. But
yeah, just like the education thing we were talking about earlier, it'll just shift again later.
Right, and so yeah, this is all this is something that's really close to my heart. But I did have someone ask me, why don't you just run for county commission? And I said, I could never do that. I've sat through those meetings. The whole zoning thing just makes my head hurt. But
that's all they do. Like that's another one. Again, that's the example. That's what it's taken me 2.5 years to learn doing the show, of what the actual position is. That county commission is 99.25% land use.
Yeah.
So is city council. Commission has a little bit more play in budget conversation than council does, but that's whatever. That's all right. Rabbit hole.
Yeah, I have no desire to do anything besides school board.
Gotcha. Number 2 is what's your favorite place to eat around here?
Probably Sono Taco. That's just kind of, there's so many great new restaurants though in South Knoxville. So have you been to Red Bud? Red Bud is really great. It's down on Sevier Avenue, and
we lived in off of Moody there in Taliwa, off of Chapman for the last stretch of my UT experience, and then the first couple of years before I got out of the.
It's changed so drastically.
I was down there today. I'm down there every Wednesday for my day job, but I just go down Chapman a little bit, and then I get right back out of there. I have not spent a lot of time in South.
Well, Sono, Red Bud, there's a restaurant called Simple, Simpl, that just has marvelous food. I could actually go on for a while because things have grown so tremendous. I'm
going to have to be a stickler interviewer here and say, pick one. Give me one. Hurt somebody's feelings. Give me the one.
Sono.
Okay.
Taco.
That was the first one you said anyway, so that works.
Yeah.
So the number 3 is the other highly enlightened question that I have on my list of 5 is, what's your favorite ice cream?
Coffee ice cream.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, that's weird for me because ice cream is a bedtime thing for me, so coffee at bedtime's never good. But, that's why we ask the questions. All right, so number 4, we get back into actual real issues, and it specifically makes sense for you because of this status change of this race is why or do you feel like partisanship helps me, the voter, in your election?
Absolutely not. School board should never be partisan. And I really noticed once that was that change came about watching the board meetings, because I didn't really miss many board meetings. There seemed to be a subtle shift, and it seemed like they started playing more to their base, their political base. And that made me really sad. So no, I wish that the school board races were not partisan. Okay.
And so that as a Democrat, because you're running as a Democrat.
Yes.
Well, okay. So let's kind of sub out. I'm not quite in the real question number 5 yet. But you would identify yourself as a Democrat regardless of the fact that you needed to pick something to run. You didn't need to, but you kind of need to.
Well, if you look at my voting record, I've voted in as many Republican primaries as I have Democrat. I usually vote for the person that I think is the best person. So, in the early 2000s, I was pretty much voting for mostly Republicans. And in the last 10 years, I've been voting much more on the Democrat side. So I'm more of an issues, what's important to me and what do I think the candidate brings to the table. One thing I've been telling people as I've been campaigning is don't vote for me not because you agree with everything that I'm saying, but because you trust me to be on the board and make good decisions. And that's kind of what I'm pushing about myself, is that I weigh things and I think about them and I research them, and then I make what I believe is the best decision.
Right. Okay. Because that's the issue I have with the partisanship, specifically in this one. Your race is not as complicated because you have one on either side, but you get like District 7, that's like 3 Republicans and an independent. Or the district,
not anymore.
Right?
There's one Republican and
right.
independent.
But the better example is like the commission race in 7, where you have 4 Republicans and nothing. So that primary is a winner. So that race is already over. And with the way the complex of the primary is, a bunch of people didn't get to vote in that race because they consider themselves Democrats, and I think that's a terrible way to do this thing. And so, all right. So anyway, number 5 is, since you are a Democrat or running as a Democrat, I need you to tell me about a Republican, preferably out of local government, that you like and you think has done great things.
Well, I will say during the pandemic and working for the health department, I would have to say Senator Briggs, because he was constantly calling us and supporting us and asking what he could do for us. He's a big supporter of Dr. Buchanan. And so, yeah, Senator Briggs.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's it for me. If you want to take a minute and you want to plug your Facebook website, that kind of thing, let anybody know anything specifically that we didn't maybe cover that you wanted to get out there. The floor is yours for the next couple minutes, or whatever.
Well, I have, obviously, as everyone does, I have a Facebook page. It's Annabel and the number 4 education. Also on Instagram with Annabel, the number 4 in education. And my website, just to keep it, Annabel, the number 4 education.com.
Best way to do it.
And then Twitter would not let me have anything that long. So it's Annabel 4Ed with the number 4. So pretty easy to find me. And you can find me out in the public in a big yellow shirt with a blue bell on it.
Excellent. I will throw some of those into the show notes so people can link through there and not have to remember that very easy to remember thing. Well, I really appreciate it. It was fun. I wish you the best of luck coming up in here in August. I got, I'm sure I've had so many interviews at this point, I forgot who I've talked to or not. So if for those interested, I think I've already done Christy, but I don't remember if I've done it for this race or back when she was just a school board rep. Anyway, that's what we do. I thank you so much for the time. I've got an outro to do, and we're going to call it a show.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Annabelle. Oh, wrong button. See, got me so distracted. Almost in agreement, everybody. Pushing wrong buttons, doing what I do. Almost in agreement at gmail.com. Find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. Go to our website, almostagreement.com. Check out Voter Guide 22. Voter Guide 22 will have the link to this show as well as the link to Annabelle's website. And then the same thing for Christy and the Christy show that I did. And everybody else that's running, at least in the local races. I'm not going to try to fill out the entire state one, although I do have it listed. I'm not going to be able to get everybody on there for shows and stuff like that. So check it out. I think it's a functionally useful guide. KGIS and Election Commission are on there, so you can get double check your registration status, make sure you know where your voting location is, what districts you're voting for, which then therefore means who you're allowed to vote for, and then you can learn about those people. We got more interviews coming up. I got a couple more scheduled already. I have a few state races I've started scheduling as well, so stay tuned for those things. We're got a small programming change coming up over the next couple weeks. Our standard episodes are going to start releasing on Wednesday or Thursday instead of Sunday, so just be aware that that's coming down the pipeline in the next couple weeks. But we should have more shows with more people, so that's the fun part. So anyway, almost in agreement, everybody. Have a great night, and we appreciate you all hanging out.